Your neighbors are going to walk past your yard this June and pause mid-stride. Not because you have more time than them, not because you outspent them at the garden center, because you made one decision this April that they didn't, and by midsummer, that decision has turned into something they genuinely cannot explain. 11 perennials, 1 month, a yard so layered, so alive, and so relentlessly colorful that people slow their cars just to look at it twice. These plants come back on their own. They spread without your help. They multiply while you're doing something else entirely. And if you miss April, you hand the entire season to someone who didn't. So let's not waste a single second more. Here's exactly what to put in the ground right now. Plant 1, creeping time. Most gardeners walk straight past this at the nursery and reach for something taller, something showier, something they recognize. Every single one of them is missing the most quietly spectacular ground-level transformation available in American horticulture right now. Thymus serpyllum is hardy in USDA zones 4 through 9, and it does something nothing else does with quite the same elegance. It turns your most impossible, sun-baked, bone-dry, foot-trafficked strip of ground into a carpet of tiny magenta, pink, and white flowers so dense and so fragrant that walking across it releases a wave of herbal perfume that stops people cold. Think about the cracked strip between your driveway and the lawn edge. Think about the gap between patio pavers that you have been filling with mulch and fighting with weeds for 3 years. That is creeping time's ideal home. It threads itself between stones, softens hard edges, flows over pavement lips, and requires nothing from you in return. It tolerates foot traffic better than most ground covers available to American gardeners. It blooms from late spring through midsummer, and pollinators work it constantly. Dozens of bee species, visiting the tiny individual flowers in numbers that are genuinely striking for a plant that sits only 2 inches off the ground. It spreads by trailing stems that root wherever they contact soil, quietly expanding outward each season without crowding neighboring plants or demanding division. Leave it alone, and it handles everything itself. The one thing most gardening content never mentions about creeping time: it is a fully functional culinary herb. The same plant carpeting your pathway edge can be harvested for cooking. You're getting a living mulch, a pollinator resource, a weed suppressor, a pathway softener, and a kitchen herb from one plant in one April planting decision. That kind of return does not come from annuals. Plant 2, purple coneflower. This plant has been growing wild across American prairies for thousands of years, long before anyone was selling it in a 4-inch pot at a big box store for $8. Echinacea purpurea is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9, which means it covers nearly every gardening region on the continent, and it performs in those zones with a toughness that makes first-time growers genuinely suspicious. Deep rosy pink to rich purple petals that reflex backward around a raised, spiky, copper-colored central cone. The look is bold, architectural, and unmistakable in a midsummer border. But the visual is only half the story. That raised central cone is an insect ecosystem unto itself. Bumblebees work the flowers from the moment they open. Monarch butterflies visit throughout summer. And when you leave the seed heads standing through fall and winter, goldfinches cling to them for weeks, extracting seeds one by one, giving your November garden more life and movement than most people's gardens have in June. Echinacea spreads 2 ways simultaneously. Underground root crowns expand steadily each season, and self-seeding produces new plants freely around the original. In year 1, you plant 1. In year 3, you have a colony. In year 5, you are dividing it and giving plants to neighbors who have been admiring your yard from the sidewalk since June. It is drought tolerant once established because those deep prairie roots reach moisture that surface-rooted annuals never access. It belongs in American gardens not as an exotic import, but as a native plant finally being returned to the ground it evolved in. And here is the economic reality that the garden center will never volunteer. One mature 3-year coneflower clump divides into 8 to 12 viable plants in a single morning. At current nursery prices, one April planting eventually produces over $100 worth of free divisions straight from your own yard. Plant 3, Russian sage. If you have a hot, dry spot in your yard that has defeated every plant you have ever tried, a south-facing slope that bakes from July through September, a gravel strip along a fence line that seems to pull all moisture away from anything you put in it, this is the plant that was literally built for that exact problem. Perovskia atriplycifolia is hardy in USDA zones 5 through 9, and it does something no other perennial in that zone range can replicate. It produces a haze of tiny violet blue flowers on silver-white stems from midsummer all the way through October, a full 4 months of bloom, creating a gauzy, almost ethereal cloud of color that looks more like a painting than a plant. The silver stems and finely cut foliage remain attractive all season, even before and after bloom. The foliage is strongly aromatic, and that aromatics is precisely why deer walk right past it. Not just away from it, past it. They evaluate plants by scent before they taste them, and a Russian sage puts them off at the approach stage before they are ever close enough to do damage. In a yard with deer pressure, this plant is structural protection that never washes off, never needs reapplication, and works every single day of every season regardless of weather. It pairs with ornamental grasses, with black-eyed Susans, with coneflowers, with roses. Professional landscape designers who charge hundreds of dollars per hour reach for Russian sage consistently when they need something that performs without complaint in the harshest corners of a residential garden. Now you know exactly why they do. Plant 4, Salvia nemorosa. This one stops conversations. Caradonna is the cultivar you want. Deep violet-purple flower spikes on nearly black stems from late spring through midsummer, and when you cut it back hard after the first bloom flush, it comes back within 3 weeks with a second flush nearly as strong as the first. 2 complete bloom seasons from one plant in a single year at no additional cost and no additional work beyond one cut. Salvia nemorosa is hardy in USDA zones 4 through 8. It is completely deer-resistant. It is drought-tolerant once established. It is irresistible to bumblebees, which work it so intensively on warm mornings that you can hear it before you see it. The hum from a mass planting of Caradonna in full bloom on a June morning is one of those garden experiences that stays with you. Bees are not visiting it politely. They are working it with an urgency that tells you everything you need to know about how valuable this nectar source is to the local insect population. From a design standpoint, the vertical flower spike is one of the most useful shapes in perennial gardening. It creates contrast against the round forms of coneflowers and the flat-topped clusters of yarrow. It adds height without bulk. It draws the eye upward. Mass planted in groups of 3 or 5, it does not look like a garden bed. It looks like a decision made by someone who studied horticulture. That is the result April planting produces. A yard that reads as intentional. 2 minutes into bloom roots, and if this is already changing how you think about what your yard can actually be, subscribe right now before plant 5. Not at the end. Now. Because the gardeners who subscribe in the middle of a video are the ones who come back, the ones who implement, the ones whose yards look completely different by this time next year. Hit that button. It takes 3 seconds, and it means this kind of information finds you every single week going forward. Plant 5, a stilbe? Most gardening advice tells you that shade is a problem to solve. Bloom Roots is going to tell you something different. Shade is the condition that a stilbe was waiting for you to have. A stilbe X orense is hardy in USDA zones 4 through 9. And it does, in part, shade what almost nothing else can match it. Produces tall, feathery plumes in deep red, hot pink, soft lavender, creamy white, and coral from early to midsummer. Colors so saturated and plumes so dramatic that the shady corner of your yard stops being the part you apologize for and starts being the part people notice first. The foliage is deeply cut and glossy, attractive from the moment it emerges in spring through the end of the season. And here is what almost nobody tells you about a stilbe. The dried plumes are beautiful. When the flowers finish and the seed heads form and turn to a warm russet brown, they stand through fall and into winter, providing structure and texture in a season when most shade gardens have completely dissolved into bare ground and brown leaves. You are getting a 4-season plant from something that lives in the spot you considered a problem. It spreads reliably through rhizomes and benefits from division every 4 years, which gives you free plants and reinvigorates the original clump simultaneously. Combine early, mid-season, and late blooming varieties, and you extend the bloom window across 2 full months in the same planting bed. 1 shady bed, 1 April decision, 2 months of color. Plant 6, Agastache. If you have never watched a hummingbird hover 3 feet from your face while you sit on your porch in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon, this is the plant that makes that happen. And once it happens once, you will never leave Agastache out of your garden again. Agastache rupestris and its cultivars are hardy in USDA zones 5 through 9, and they bloom from midsummer through frost. One of the longest bloom windows available to American gardeners, in orange, coral, pink, and soft blue depending on the variety. The tubular flower shape is biologically matched to hummingbird feeding. Their beaks fit perfectly inside. They return daily, all season. The plant is strongly aromatic, which provides the secondary benefit of complete deer resistance, and it is drought tolerant to a degree that rivals yarrow. Once established, it manages its own water needs through the hottest, driest weeks of an American summer without asking anything from you. Hummingbirds are not the only wildlife response. Tiger swallowtails visit. Sphinx moths visit in the evening hours, hovering at the same flowers in the same way, and creating a twilight garden moment that most people have never experienced in their own yard. That moment is available to you this June, if you put Agastache in the ground this April. The window is open right now. 6 plants in, and I want to ask you something directly. What is the most frustrating spot in your yard? The one that has swallowed every plant you have put in it. The slope, the dry strip, the dead zone under the tree. Drop it in the comments right now and tell me what state you garden in. I read every single comment. Your answer shapes the next Bloom Roots video. Post it below before you forget. Plant 7, Hutera. This is the most underused shade and part shade perennial in American home gardening, and experienced gardeners know it. They have it in every border they manage, and they tend not to broadcast why, because part of the value is that their yards look different from everyone else's. Huchera coral bells is hardy in USDA zones 4 through 9, and it does something no other perennial in that zone range does, with quite the same impact. It makes foliage the main event. Burgundy, copper, caramel, deep purple, silver, lime green, near black, and combinations of multiple colors on a single leaf. The flower spikes that emerge in late spring are delicate and airy, and hummingbirds visit them, but the foliage is what carries the garden from April through November without a single dull week in between. It is an evergreen to semi-evergreen plant in zones 6 and warmer, which means it contributes color and structure in months when everything around it has gone dormant and gray. Use it as a living color anchor in a shade bed, as a contrasting edge along a pathway, as a ground cover under a large tree where grass refuses to establish. It grows in the dry shade under surface roots, where almost nothing else survives. Divide it every 3 to 4 years in spring, the crown slowly heaves upward over time, and division reinvigorates it immediately and produces free plants. One April purchase, managed correctly, keeps producing viable plants for a decade. Plant 8, penstemon. There is one plant on this list that hummingbirds will notice before you finish planting it, not from across the yard. While you are still on your knees with the trowel, Penstemon digitalis Husker Red is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 8, one of the most cold-tolerant garden perennials available to American gardeners, and it pairs deep burgundy red foliage with tall spikes of tubular white flowers that emerge in early summer and continue for weeks. The color contrast between the dark leaves and the light flowers is striking in a way photographs do not do full justice to. You have to see it in a garden catching late afternoon light to understand why designers use it as an anchor plant in borders. Beyond the visual, the tubular flowers are a precision hummingbird feeding mechanism. The birds find it within days of bloom and return on a schedule you will start to recognize. Penstemon is native to North America, which means, once established, it manages drought, heat, cold, and soil variation with a resilience that imported ornamentals cannot match. It was built for American conditions. It belongs in American gardens. Self-seeds freely and the seedlings come true, producing a slowly expanding colony over years with no intervention from you beyond enjoying the result. Plant 9, Baptisia. Millions of American gardeners have never heard of this plant. The ones who have and still have not planted it will spend the rest of their gardening lives regretting it. False indigo, Baptisia australis, is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9, among the most cold hardy perennials available to continental American gardeners, and it does something almost no other perennial does. It becomes more spectacular every single year for its entire life, which can span decades without division, without replacement, without significant maintenance of any kind. In late spring, it sends up tall spikes covered in indigo blue pea-shaped flowers that look almost too vivid to be real against the blue-green foliage. After bloom, the inflated seed pods turn charcoal black and rattle in the wind through fall, adding sound and movement and late-season structure to the garden in a way that is genuinely unique. It is completely deer-resistant. It is drought-tolerant once its deep taproot establishes in the first season. It fixes nitrogen in the soil around it, improving conditions for every neighboring plant. It supports specialist native bees that evolve specifically to forage on it, bees that cannot obtain adequate nutrition from other plant families. Growing Baptisia is a direct ecological contribution that most gardeners have never considered, and it asks almost nothing in return beyond being left alone to do what it does. Before plant 10, something worth saying directly. If Bloom Roots has given you even one plant in the last few minutes that is going to change what your yard looks like this summer, subscribe right now, not later. The gardeners who subscribe today are the ones whose yards tell a different story by October. That story starts with one decision this April. Be the person who makes it. Hit subscribe and then keep going, because plant 10 is the one that changes how you see the last 2 months of your gardening season. Plant 10, Turtlehead. September and October in most American gardens look like surrender. The spring flush is a memory, the summer perennials are finishing, and the garden enters a slow fade toward frost that most gardeners have simply accepted as inevitable. That is not inevitable. It is a planting gap, and Chelonia obliqua fills it with more saturated color in the back half of the season than most gardens see at their peak in June. Turtlehead is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 8, and it blooms in deep rose pink and rich purple from late summer through October, precisely when the competition for color is lowest, and the visual impact of a blooming plant is therefore highest. The flowers are enclosed and tubular, shaped like a turtle's head with its mouth partially open, and that shape is specifically accessed by bumblebees large enough to force their way inside. It is a plant with a built-in ecological filter, attracting the exact pollinator species it evolved alongside. It is one of the primary larval host plants for the Baltimore checker spot butterfly, a a species of conservation concern across much of the eastern United States. Growing turtlehead in your yard is not incidental conservation. It is direct habitat provision for a butterfly species that needs it. It thrives in moist conditions and part shade, which makes it the ideal plant for the wet, shaded spots near a downspout, beside a pond, at the edge of a low area in your lawn that holds water after rain. Every yard has a spot like that. Most gardeners treat it as a problem. Turtlehead treats it as home. Plant 11, ironweed. When this plant blooms in August and September, it does not look like a garden plant. It looks like something that escaped from a dream. Vernonia noveboracensis is hardy in USDA zones 5 through 9, and it produces clusters of the most intensely saturated purple flowers in the American native plant palette, a purple so vivid and so electric that it photographs almost unbelievably and looks even more striking in person against the warm gold and brown tones of the late-season landscape surrounding it. It grows tall, 4 to 6 feet in ideal conditions, which means it belongs at the back of a border or in a naturalized area where its height is an asset rather than a problem. It blooms when almost nothing else of comparable visual impact is available to American gardeners, that August through October window when most gardens are brown and tired and finished. Ironweed is just beginning. Monarch butterflies use it as a critical fueling station during fall migration. Research from Monarch Watch documents ironweed as one of the highest value late-season nectar sources on the eastern and central migration flyways. When a monarch lands on your ironweed in September, pausing on its way to Mexico, resting in your yard for 20 minutes before continuing south, that is the moment this entire list pays off. Every plant in the ground, every April decision, every choice you made when this video was still playing. That monarch in September, that is what you planted for. Every plant on this list could technically be purchased in May or June, so why does April matter? Why is the window open right now and not in 8 weeks? Because of what happens underground before anything happens above ground. In April, soil temperatures across most American growing zones sit between 50 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the precise biological range where perennial root systems establish fastest, extend deepest, and develop the structural anchoring they need to survive their first American summer. Plant in that window and roots have 8 to 10 weeks of cool, moist, low-stress development before peak summer heat arrives. 8 to 10 weeks of building resilience into the plant at its most fundamental level. Miss that window, plant in late June or July, and those same roots are trying to establish in hot, dry, compacted soil, while simultaneously supporting a plant that is already being asked to grow and bloom above ground. The energy demand splits. Establishment slows. The plant survives, but it does not perform, not that first season, and first season establishment determines every season after it. Every plant put in the ground this April will spread further, bloom more heavily, and build more permanent structure than the identical plant installed 6 weeks later. April is not a preference. It is a biological window with a closing date, and it is open right now. Before you plant a single thing, 3 rules that determine whether everything you do this April builds a garden or just a collection of struggling plants. Most gardening content skips all 3 entirely. Rule 1, amend your drainage before you touch a trowel. Poor drainage kills more spreading perennials than drought, cold, pests, and neglect combined. Dig a hole 1 foot deep, fill it with water, wait an hour. If water remains at the end of that hour, you have a drainage problem that will undermine every plant on this list. Fix it with coarse grit and compost, work deeply into the existing soil, or build raised beds above the problem area. Do it once, do it correctly, and it permanently expands what your soil can grow. Rule 2, division is the most underused tool in home gardening. Every plant on this list divides. Most of them benefit from division every 3 to 4 years. Every division is a complete, viable, blooming plant that costs you nothing, except the time it takes to dig and separate it. At current nursery prices, one mature established clump produces $50 to $150 worth of free plants in a single morning with a garden fork. You should never purchase a plant twice that you already have, growing in your own yard. Rule 3, leave the seed heads standing through winter. The instinct every autumn is to cut everything back, clean everything up, make it look tidy. Resist that instinct. The seed heads you remove are the food source that goldfinches, sparrows, and chickadees depend on through the coldest months. They are the overwintering habitat that beneficial insects need to complete their life cycles and return to your garden next spring. They are the self-seeding mechanism that multiplies your plants for free while the ground is frozen solid. Leave them standing. Your garden will be more alive, more ecologically connected, and more naturally self-sustaining for it, and you will do less work. That is what a garden built on native and well-adapted perennials actually delivers. More beauty, more wildlife, and less labor every single season it matures. You just spent time learning 11 plants that will change what your yard looks and feels like by June, and keep changing it, keep improving it, keep expanding it for years from now without requiring you to start over every spring. That is not a gardening video. That is a plan, a real, specific, actionable plan for a yard that rewards you more with every season that passes. If Bloom Roots gave you even one plant you're going to put in the ground this April, subscribe right now because next week we go just as deep, and the week after that. Every single week, this channel publishes content at this level. Real plant knowledge, real zone-specific guidance, real information that saves you money and transforms how your outdoor space performs year after year. You do not want to be the person who finds Bloom Roots 6 months from now and wishes they had subscribed today. The gardeners who subscribed at the beginning of this video are already ahead of where you were when you started watching. Join them right now. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and before you go, drop one comment below. Tell me which plant from this list you are putting in the ground first this April, and tell me what zone or state you garden in. I read every comment. I respond to as many as I can, and your answers directly shape what Bloom Roots covers next. This is your garden. This is your season. April is open right now. Go plant something.